You feel a weight on your heart, don't you? A whisper, barely audible, saying you are more than your fears. Because after the seed of purpose falls, storms come. Persecutions, doubts, betrayals, shame that looms heavier than night. Picture that same crowd by the Sea of Galilee. The sun burning, dust in the air, voices restless. Suddenly the sky cracks open, not with thunder, but with a question. A man stands arms wide, calling into the chaos of human longing, "Who do you say that I am?" No parable now, just you, just your heart. Do you recognize the voice? Do you see the scars? Because this man does not ask from a distance. He invites you to look into his wounds, to touch what was pierced so you could be made whole. He tells them another story, a shepherd with 100 sheep. One wanders off. The 99 stay safe, but the shepherd goes after the one. Through cliffs, through darkness, he searches. He will not rest until that lost sheep is carried home. That story isn't about sheep, it's about you. About your failure, your shame, the moments you ran so far you thought you'd broken faith forever. He searches for you, even now, even in the places you wished no one would find you. Then comes the tale of the prodigal son. The younger one demands his inheritance, leaves, wastes everything. Hungry, broken, he realizes that the smallest servants in his father's house have more than him. He returns, rehearsing apologies, expecting rejection, but the father sees him from afar. Runs, embraces, celebrates. Do you sense the shame in that younger son, the guilt you carry? The fear that when you return you'll only find judgment, but the Father surprises you. He does not scold. He does not shame. He kills the fatted calf. He restores his robe, his ring, his identity. And then the story shifts. The older brother watching from the distance, resentful, righteous, blinded by bitterness. He cannot understand grace because he never saw his own need of it. Which one are you, the lost child coming back with tearful heart, or the elder, arms crossed, heart cold, saying, "All I need is fairness"? There is more. Jesus speaks of hidden treasure. A merchant searching, selling all he owns to buy a field where a treasure lies buried. He risks everything. Why? Because what he found is priceless. What things have you held back? What parts of you do you hide because you fear their cost? And yet, what if God is inviting you to sell your everything, your pride, your past, for the treasure that costs more than regret, more than loss, more than sacrifice? These parables target the places your culture taught you to bury, the shame you tucked away in the corners of your heart, the wounds you declared heal on their own. The lies you believe, not enough, unworthy, forgotten. And in the quiet between the words there is grace. In the silence Jesus lets linger. In the questions he never immediately answers, because belief is not information, it is encounter. Faith is not a contract, it is surrender. Now feel this, if your heart is rocky or full of weeds or wandering in exile, this moment is not too late. The seed still falls. The night still passes. The sun still rises. Does your heart pulse now with hope, even a faint tremor? Say it, I want to be the good soil. I want to let the weeds go. I want the treasure so much that I will risk the cost. You may have failed many times. You may have seen the darkness inside and wanted to hide. But remember, the greatest stories Jesus told were the ones that welcomed sinners, healed the broken, restored the lost. So I ask you, will you let him in? Will you trade fear for faith, shame for identity, exile for home? Because the stories, the parables, they are not just ancient echoes. They are invitations, every one of them. Take a breath, let this sink deep. This isn't just a message, it's a turning point in your life, a crossroads. The path forward demands choice, and choice changes everything. If you hear this, if the Spirit whispers in you, do not turn back. Stand, speak, believe. Will you allow your life to be a field where seeds take root? Or will you let the enemy's seeds overrun your soil? Hear his voice now. Choose, step. Become the heart that God intended. Hold on to this. Every parable is a mirror. And when you dare to look into it, sometimes what you see might disturb you. But if you're brave enough not to look away, you might just find a map to something greater than you ever imagined. Now, I want to ask you, the one watching this video right now, which of these parables feels like it's describing your life today? Be honest. Drop it in the comments. I truly want to read what's in your heart. Maybe your hardened soil. Maybe your roots are shallow, or maybe the thorns of this world are choking your soul. But maybe, just maybe, you're fertile ground ready to bear fruit. And what you're about to hear might shift your entire view of life and faith. Because what these stories hide is far more shocking than most ever realize. Don't go anywhere. What's about to unfold could make you see your own life and your walk with God in a way you never have before. When Jesus spoke about the mustard seed, nobody expected the mystery buried within that tiny speck. It looked useless, forgettable, insignificant. But with time it became a tree so large birds could rest in its branches. And the message, it hit like thunder. How could something so weak become so strong? That is the essence of God's kingdom. What seems small becomes unstoppable. What's ignored becomes mighty, and that includes you. You might feel like your faith is tiny, your efforts meaningless, your prayers weak. But be careful, because the thing you're underestimating, that quiet whisper, that single act of obedience, that tiny spark of belief, might just be the seed of your greatest transformation. So here's the uncomfortable question. What seed are you ignoring? That could be the shelter you'll need tomorrow. Jesus didn't stop there. He knew the crowd was breathless, hooked. That's when he told another story, one that sounded simple, but hid a truth that makes most people squirm. The kingdom of heaven, he said, is like leaven. A woman hides just a pinch in 3 measures of flour. Nobody sees it. Nobody notices at first. But over time it spreads, quietly, invisibly, until all the dough is changed. Do you say it? It's a power that moves from the inside. No spotlight, no stage, but a change that cannot be stopped. That's how the kingdom works. It doesn't begin with applause, it begins in secret. And then it starts transforming everything. But let's be honest. Isn't it terrifying to realize how many things grow silently inside of us? Not all change is good. Because what leaven does for good, fear can do for destruction. So can guilt. So can the lies we repeat to ourselves. Yes, Jesus was speaking of holy transformation, but he left the door open for a deeper reflection, one that made every listener squirm a little. What's growing inside you right now? What leaven is expanding in your soul? And just when they thought it couldn't go deeper, he told another story, one that shattered their comfort, one that left the crowd completely stunned. A man is working in a field. It doesn't even belong to him, just another day. But suddenly, his tool hits something hard beneath the soil. He bends down, starts digging, and what he finds steals the breath from his lungs. A treasure, not just gold, a life-changing treasure, more valuable than anything he ever imagined. He doesn't own it, not yet. So what does he do? He hides it again, and then he runs. He sells everything, his house, his livestock, his furniture, everything he's ever worked for, all of it gone. And here's what will break you. He doesn't regret it. He's filled with joy, because he knows what's waiting for him in that field. Now I ask you, what would you be willing to give up to find the one thing that would finally give your life meaning? The crowd was silent. Some were crying, because deep inside they understood this wasn't about a man in a field. It was about them, and it's about you. But Jesus didn't stop. He looked over the sea into their souls and raised the tension even higher. He told them of a merchant, a man who had spent his life looking for pearls, not just any pearls, the finest. He'd seen thousands, bought hundreds, traveled the world, negotiated with kings and paupers. But then he finds one pearl unlike any other, flawless, radiant, worth more than everything he owns. So what does he do? He sells everything. His entire collection, his wealth, his identity as a merchant, gone. Why? Because one pearl was worth more than all the others combined. Here's what most people miss. The treasure in the field, that was found by accident, but the pearl, that was found after a lifetime of searching. And that's the beauty of the kingdom. Sometimes it finds you when you least expect it, and sometimes it rewards the ones who refuse to stop searching. But either way, when you find it, nothing else matters. Now I'll ask you again, what have you been searching for your whole life? What is the one thing that you would give up everything else to obtain? And here, in the middle of this weighty silence, Jesus raises his voice once more. The tension crackles in the air. The listeners are on the edge. And the next parable he tells is one that no one was ready for. The kingdom of heaven, Jesus said, is like a massive net thrown into the sea. It drags through the waters, pulling in fish of every kind. The fishermen heave it to the shore, sweat dripping, muscles straining until the net opens wide. Then comes the separation. The good fish are set aside, useful for feeding, for giving life, for selling. But the bad ones, the rotten, the worthless, are thrown away. And then Jesus explained, this is what the end of the age will be like. A final separation, the righteous and the unrighteous. Those who truly belonged to the kingdom and those who only looked like they did. Can you feel the silence that must have fallen over that crowd? No one wanted to say it out loud, but everyone was thinking it. What if I'm among the ones thrown away? That question hasn't lost its edge. If the net fell right now, which side would you be on? But the most unsettling parable was still waiting. Jesus told of a king who decided to settle accounts with his servants. One servant owed him an unpayable sum, so great a debt that no matter how many lifetimes he lived, he could never repay it. Out of sheer mercy, the king forgave it all. Imagine that relief, walking out free, debt erased, future restored. But then the very same servant found a fellow worker who owed him a tiny fraction by comparison. He seized him by the throat and demanded payment. When the man couldn't repay, he threw him into prison. When word reached the king, fury blazed. He summoned the servant and thundered, "How could you not forgive a small debt when I forgave you everything?" And he handed him over to the jailers until the impossible debt was repaid. The lesson landed like fire. The forgiveness you receive must be reflected in the forgiveness you give. If you don't, the same judgment you escaped will fall on you. And isn't that one of the most terrifying truths? None of us wants to see ourselves in that cruel servant, but so many of us are. Forgiven, yet unwilling to forgive. Loved, yet refusing to love. every person in that crowd was forced to look into that mirror. And so are you right now, because these aren't just stories, they're confrontations, emotional explosions designed to crack the heart wide open. They demand you examine what you're allowing to grow in your soul, what you value most, and how you treat the people around you. So let me ask you, which of these parables hits you hardest? The treasure hidden in the field, asking you to give up everything. The pearl of great price, demanding you recognize what's truly valuable. The net, forcing you to think about your eternal destiny. Or the unforgiving servant, confronting you with the way you handle forgiveness. Drop your answer in the comments. I want to read it. And keep watching, because what's coming next will make every piece of this fit together. Now imagine it again. The debt was 10,000 talents. Do you know what that means? 1 talent was worth 20 years of wages. Multiply that by 10,000. That's over 200,000 years of labor, a sum no ordinary man could ever repay. Standing before the king, the servant shook with terror. He was about to lose everything, his freedom, his family, his future. He collapsed to his knees, begging desperately, "Have patience with me, I will pay it back." His words were empty. He could never repay. Yet the king, moved with compassion, did the unthinkable. He erased the entire debt. Centuries of labor gone with a single act of mercy. Can you feel the shock in the crowd? The weight lifted, the impossible made possible, hope born out of despair. But then the twist. That same servant, forgiven everything, finds a fellow man who owes him 100 denarii, just a few months' wages. He grabs him, chokes him, demands repayment. The man begs with the same words, "Have patience with me." But this time there's no mercy. The unforgiving servant throws him into prison. When the king hears it, his mercy turns to righteous anger. "Wicked servant," he cries, "I forgave you everything when you begged me. Shouldn't you have shown the same mercy?" And the man is handed to the torturers, condemned without hope. Do you see it? The message is brutal. God offers forgiveness beyond measure, but if you receive it and refuse to extend it, you show you never truly understood grace. The crowd stood silent, hearts trembling. And what about you? Doesn't this parable cut to the bone? Because none of us want to admit it, but how often have we, after being forgiven, refused to forgive? Jesus left them with that tension hanging heavy. And then he told another story. A vineyard owner went out early in the morning to hire workers. He promised them a denarius for the day's labor. Later, at different hours, he returned for more workers. Even at the last hour, when the sun was setting, he found more and sent them into the vineyard. When the day ended, he paid them all, but he began with the last. And to their shock, they each received a denarius. The ones who had worked all day smiled, expecting more, but when it was their turn, they too received just 1 denarius. The grumbling rose immediately. "This isn't fair. We bore the heat, the exhaustion, the burden. How could we be paid the same as those who worked just 1 hour?" The owner replied with piercing calm, "Friend, I'm not being unfair. Didn't you agree to a denarius? Take what is yours and go. I choose to give the last worker the same as you. Don't I have the right to do what I want with my own money, or are you envious because I am generous?" The lesson hit like a hammer to pride. In God's kingdom, grace isn't measured by hours served, or effort given, or seniority earned. It is measured only by the boundless generosity of heaven. But if that parable rattled them, the next one cut even deeper. Jesus spoke of a father with 2 sons. To the first he said, "Son, go work in my vineyard." The boy snapped back, "I will not." But later, regret stirred him and he went. The second son was asked the same. His answer was polite, obedient on the surface. Yes, Father, I will go, but he never did. And in that moment, the crowd leaned in, knowing the question was coming. Which son did the will of the Father? Who did the will of the Father? The answer was obvious: the first son, the one who said no but later obeyed. And here was the lesson: obedience is not about words, it's not about appearances, it's about action. In that moment, many who stood there, religious leaders, Pharisees, men proud of their outward devotion, felt exposed. Their lips said yes, but their hearts had never obeyed. And I ask you now, which son are you more like? The one who resisted but repented, or the one who promised but never acted? Jesus didn't let the tension fade. Instead, he went darker. He told the parable of the wicked tenants. A man planted a vineyard complete and beautiful. He built a fence, a winepress, a watchtower. Then he leased it to tenants and left. When harvest came, he sent servants to collect his share. But the tenants, greedy and violent, beat the servants, stoned them, even killed some. In patience beyond reason, the owner sent more. But again, bloodshed. Finally, he made a dangerous choice. He sent his own son, thinking surely they will respect him, but instead they plotted. This is the heir. Let's kill him, and the inheritance will be ours. And they dragged him outside the vineyard and murdered him. Silence gripped the crowd. They knew this wasn't just a story, it was a prophecy. It was Israel's history, rejecting prophets, silencing God's messengers, and soon rejecting the Son himself. And now I turn to you. What do you do with the voices God sends into your life? Do you ignore the warnings, mock the correction, hurt the very ones sent to help you? Or do you listen before it's too late? These parables weren't bedtime stories. They were spiritual earthquakes. They cracked open hearts, revealed hypocrisy, demanded a response. So tell me in the comments, seriously, which one unsettles you the most? The unforgiving servant exposing your refusal to forgive, the vineyard workers confronting your envy, the two sons revealing hypocrisy, or the wicked tenants showing the extremes of human rebellion? Be honest. Because your answer might be the beginning of a conversation you've avoided your whole life. But listen closely, because what Jesus said next pushed everything to a new level. The people were still shaken by the image of the murdered son. They knew this was not only a parable, it was a mirror reflecting their nation's story and a glimpse of what would soon unfold on a cross. The tension was unbearable, and yet Jesus pressed forward with another parable. The parable of the wedding banquet. A king prepared a wedding feast for his son. The preparations were magnificent: fattened cattle, tables loaded with delicacies, music tuned, the hall shimmering with expectation. When everything was ready, he sent servants to call the invited guests. But shockingly, they refused. Refusing the king's invitation wasn't just rude, it was treason. It was spitting on his honor, despising his generosity. And still the king tried again. He sent more servants with a personal message: everything is ready, come to the feast. But the guests brushed it off. One went to his farm, another to his business, and some unthinkably beat and killed the servants. The king's fury blazed. He sent his army, destroyed the murderers, burned their city. But the banquet wasn't canceled. Instead, the king widened the invitation. He told his servants, go to the streets, bring in everyone you find, good and bad alike, fill my hall. And the wedding filled with people who never dreamed they'd sit at the table of a king. But then came the twist. The king entered and saw a man without wedding clothes. "Friend," he asked, "how did you get in here without the proper garment?" The man was speechless, and the king ordered him bound and cast into outer darkness. The lesson, the invitation is for all. Grace is free, but you cannot enter on your own terms. The robe of righteousness is required, the transformation only God can give. So let me ask you, if you were invited, would you show up prepared? Or would you be cast out, confident in yourself, but clothed in nothing? And before the people could recover, Jesus told another story, the parable of the barren fig tree. A man planted a fig tree in his vineyard. For 3 years he came looking for fruit. Nothing, only leaves. In frustration, he said to the keeper, "Cut it down. Why should it waste the soil?" But the keeper pleaded, "Give it 1 more year. I'll dig around it, fertilize it, care for it. If it bears fruit, good. If not, then cut it down." The meaning was sharp. God is patient, but not forever. He looks for fruit in your life, real fruit, not empty appearances. So tell me, if your life were that fig tree, what would he find right now? And Jesus still wasn't done. He told of 2 builders. One dug deep, laying his foundation on rock. The other hurried, building on sand. From the outside, the houses looked the same. But when the storm came, the truth was revealed. The house on the rock stood firm. The house on the sand collapsed in ruin. And here was the piercing truth. It is not enough to hear God's words. It is not enough to nod in agreement. The only thing that matters is whether you build your life on them, because storms will come. And when they do, what you built on will be exposed. The difference is not in hearing the words of Jesus. It's in living them. Whoever hears and obeys builds on rock. Whoever hears and does nothing builds on sand. Imagine the uneasiness on the faces of that crowd. Many knew they listened, but they never obeyed. And you, what are you building your life on? Rock that lasts, or sand that will crumble? But Jesus didn't let the weight of that question lift. With his eyes burning into their souls, he told another short but cutting parable, the parable of the merciful creditor. 2 men owed money. One owed much, the other less. Neither could pay. The creditor, in a shocking act of compassion, forgave both debts, and Jesus asked, "Who will love him more?" The answer was clear, the one forgiven most. The lesson was simple but searing. Real love grows from gratitude. Whoever truly understands how much they have been forgiven will respond with overflowing love. But whoever thinks they've only been forgiven a little will love little. The people pondered in silence. But Jesus had another story, one of the most famous, yet also one of the most confronting, the parable of the Good Samaritan. A man was traveling down from Jerusalem to Jericho, a road notorious for bandits hiding in the rocky cliffs. As many feared, he was attacked, beaten savagely, and left half dead on the roadside. A priest came by, a religious man, respected, learned. He saw him, he stepped closer, and then he passed by. A Levite followed, another man of religious service. He too saw the broken body. He too walked away. The man lay bleeding, abandoned, invisible to those expected to help. And then came the unthinkable. A Samaritan, an enemy, despised by Jews. No one expected compassion from him. But when he saw the man, he didn't ask where he was from, what he believed, or if he deserved help. He only saw a human in need. He stopped, he knelt. He poured costly oil and wine on the wounds. He lifted the man onto his own animal, walked alongside him, brought him to an inn, and cared for him. The next day he left money for the innkeeper and promised to return to cover any extra cost. Jesus asked the crushing question, which of these three was a neighbor to the man? The answer could not be avoided, the one who showed mercy. And then came the command that still echoes through the centuries. Go and do the same. The crowd was stunned. That story tore down the limits of their compassion. It demolished the walls of hate. It forced them to redefine who their neighbor truly was. And I ask you now, who have you been walking past? Who lies wounded in your path unseen because you've convinced yourself they don't matter? Jesus pressed forward. He told another parable, this time about prayer. The parable of the persistent friend. A man received a traveler at midnight. He had no bread to set before him, and in that culture, hospitality was sacred. So he ran to his friend's house and knocked. From inside came a voice, "Don't bother me, the door is locked, my children are in bed." But the man kept pounding, begging, pleading. And Jesus said, even if that friend won't rise out of friendship, he will rise because of persistence. And then came the teaching that still challenges every believer. Ask, and it will be given. Seek, and you will find. Knock, and the door will be opened. And here's the haunting truth. How many times have you stopped knocking one prayer too soon? How many answers have you missed because you gave up right before the door opened? The crowd wrestled with it in silence. But then Jesus struck again with one of the most disturbing stories, the parable of the rich fool. A man's land produced an abundant harvest, so much that his barns could not hold it. Instead of thanking God or sharing with the needy, he thought only of himself. "I will tear down my barns and build bigger ones," he said. "Then I will sit back and say to myself, you have plenty for many years. Take life easy. Eat, drink, be merry." It sounded like a perfect plan. But that very night, God's voice thundered into his soul, "You fool, tonight your life will be demanded from you. Then who will get what you have prepared for yourself?" In an instant, everything collapsed. His barns, his fortune, his plans, all left behind. He entered eternity with nothing. And Jesus ended with a sentence that pierced like a blade. "This is how it will be for anyone who stores up treasure for himself, but is not rich toward God." The crowd was shaken to the core. And now it is your turn to face the question, where is your treasure? What have you been building, storing, protecting, only to realize it cannot follow you past the grave? And here is the question that should unsettle you. What are you storing up that you will never carry with you when your time comes? The crowd was heavy with silence when Jesus spoke about watchfulness. A master left for a wedding and placed his servants in charge of the house. He told them, "Be dressed for service, keep your lamps burning." They had no idea when he would return, early evening, midnight, or dawn. Their task was simple but demanding, be ready at all times. And then came the shock. Jesus said that if the master found them faithful, he would gird himself, seat them at the table, and serve them. Imagine it, the master serving the servants, a reversal no one expected. The message was clear. Christ's return will be sudden, and those who are prepared will receive a reward beyond imagination. But the careless will lose everything. And now I ask you, are you living prepared or distracted? But Jesus wasn't finished. He turned the weight higher with the parable of the faithful and the wicked servant. A servant was entrusted with responsibility to care for the household, to feed the others in due season. If his master returned and found him faithful, he would reward him with authority over all his possessions. But if that servant thought to himself, my master is delayed, and began abusing others, indulging in excess, forgetting his duty, the master would return on a day he did not expect, and his punishment would be severe. He would be cast out with the hypocrites. The crowd froze. Nobody wanted to see themselves as that wicked servant, but many knew their lives did not reflect faithfulness. And now I ask you, which servant are you? The faithful one, steady even when no one is watching, or the unfaithful, abusing the time, convinced there will be no judgment? Jesus wasn't telling stories for entertainment. Each parable was an explosion in the soul. Each demanded an answer. The message was burning now. There is no neutral ground. Either you bear fruit or you are cut down. Either you love your neighbor or you abandon them. Either you build on rock or you build on sand. Either you stay awake or you fall asleep. And what Jesus revealed next would push everything to its breaking point. The disciples still trembled from the parable of the faithful servant. Every word landed like a hammer on their hearts, because the lesson was unmistakable. The true test of faith is not in the speeches we give, but in the choices we make when we think no one is watching. The faithful servant quietly fed others, stayed sober, kept ready. The wicked servant deceived himself. My master delays. That false sense of safety led him into abuse, indulgence, cruelty. And then the devastating twist. The master arrived suddenly, caught him in his sin, and condemned him. It was a warning to leaders, to those with spiritual responsibility. But it was also a warning for everyone, because sooner or later the test comes. And are you the faithful servant who waits in obedience, or the one who lives as if the Lord will never return? Then Jesus pointed to a fig tree nearby and said, "Learn from the fig tree. When its branches soften and leaves sprout, you know summer is near." In the same way, he said, there will be signs before his return: wars, earthquakes, persecutions, deception. All of them were leaves, signs that the end was close. The call was not to predict dates, but to stay awake, to discern the times. And I ask you, are you reading the signs, or are you living as though nothing will ever change? At a dinner one day, Jesus noticed how the guests scrambled for the best seats. Everyone wanted honor, recognition, to be seen. So he told another parable. When you are invited to a wedding feast, don't sit in the place of honor, he said, because if someone more distinguished comes, you will be asked to move and end up humiliated. Instead, sit in the lowest place. Then the host may invite you higher, and you will be honored before all. And then came the principle that shook the room. Whoever exalts himself will be humbled, and whoever humbles himself will be exalted. Once again, he shattered human logic. Everyone chases recognition. Everyone wants to be noticed. But in the kingdom of God, greatness is measured in humility. So let me ask you directly, what are you chasing, recognition or service? Then Jesus spoke of the great banquet. A man prepared a magnificent feast. When everything was ready, he sent for the guests. But one by one they made excuses. One said he had bought land, another had purchased oxen, another had just married. Every excuse sounded reasonable, but every one of them rejected the greatest invitation of their lives. Furious, the master told his servants, "Go quickly into the streets. Bring in the poor, the crippled, the blind, the lame, fill this house." And when there was still room, he sent them to the highways, urging everyone to come in. The message was explosive. The kingdom wasn't reserved for a select few. It was open to all. and those who despised the invitation would be replaced by those no one expected. And I turn to you. What excuses have you been using to reject the invitation of God? Then, with tenderness, Jesus gave one of his most beloved parables, the lost sheep. Which of you, having 100 sheep, if he loses one, does not leave the 99 in the wilderness and go after the lost one until he finds it? Every shepherd listening knew the answer. Of course, no one abandons a sheep. The good shepherd searches, insists, refuses to give up. And when he finds it, when the shepherd finds the lost sheep, he lifts it on his shoulders and carries it home. And when he arrives, he calls his friends, his neighbors, and together they celebrate. And then Jesus explained, "There is more joy in heaven over one sinner who repents than over 99 who think they need no repentance." The crowd was shaken. No one expected heaven to rejoice so much over one. But this revealed the heart of God, a love that does not abandon, a love that searches until the very end. And I ask you, have you ever felt like that lost sheep? To drive the point deeper, Jesus told another story, this time about a lost coin. A woman had 10 silver coins. She lost one. She lit a lamp, swept the house, searched every corner until she found it. And when she did, she gathered her friends and rejoiced. The coin seemed small in value, but to her it was priceless. And Jesus revealed that this is how God sees every life. No one is insignificant, no one is too far gone. So let me ask you, who in your life have you considered too small, too unimportant, when in God's eyes they are a treasure? Every parable struck differently. Some shattered pride, some exposed indifference, some revealed the tenderness of a God who refuses to give up on anyone. And the most piercing truth was this: no one in that crowd could escape. Every person knew Jesus was speaking to them, and the same is true for you. These are not ancient tales. They are mirrors showing you who you are and where you are headed. And then came the climax, the parable that defined the heart of the gospel. A father had 2 sons. The younger did the unthinkable. He went to his father and demanded his inheritance. In that culture, it was as if he said, "I wish you were dead. I want your wealth, not your presence." The father's heart broke, but he granted the request. The son gathered everything, left for a distant land, and wasted it all in reckless living. While he had money, he had friends, but when the money was gone, so were they. A famine came. Hungry and desperate, he took the lowest job, feeding pigs, a shameful task for a Jew. He was so hungry he longed to eat the pigs' food, but no one gave him anything. And then, in the mud and stench, he came to his senses. He remembered his father's house. Even the servants had bread to spare. He resolved to return not as a son, but as a servant. He rehearsed his confession. "Father, I have sinned against heaven and against you. I am no longer worthy to be called your son." But while he was still a long way off, the father saw him. That means the father had been waiting, day after day, scanning the horizon, heart aching with hope. And when he saw his son, he ran, he embraced him, he kissed him. The son began his speech of shame, but the father cut him off. "Bring the best robe, put a ring on his hand, sandals on his feet, kill the fattened calf. We will celebrate. My son was dead and is alive again. He was lost and now is found." Tears streamed down the faces of the crowd. But Jesus wasn't finished. The elder son, hearing the music and dancing, grew angry. He refused to enter. He complained bitterly. "I've slaved for you all these years. I never disobeyed, yet you never gave me even a young goat to celebrate with my friends." But this son of yours, who squandered your property with prostitutes, returns, and you kill the fattened calf for him." The father went out, pleading with tenderness. "Son, you are always with me, and everything I have is yours. But it was right to celebrate, because your brother was dead and is alive again. He was lost and now is found." The message was crushing. The grace of God is so radical it offends even the righteous. And now I ask you, are you the younger son who needs to come home, or the elder son who cannot bear grace being given to others? But Jesus kept pressing. He told of the dishonest steward. A manager was accused of wasting his master's possessions. Knowing he was about to lose his position, he devised a plan. He reduced the debts of his master's clients. One who owed 100 measures of oil was told to write 50. Another who owed 100 measures of wheat was told to write 80. Surprisingly, the master praised the manager, not for his corruption, but for his shrewdness. And Jesus declared, "The children of this world are often more shrewd in dealing with their generation than the children of light." The warning was sharp. People invest more passion and creativity securing temporary things than preparing for eternity. So let me ask you, how much energy do you put into your eternal soul compared to your earthly life? But then came one of the most terrifying stories of all, the parable of the rich man and Lazarus. There was a rich man, clothed in purple and fine linen, feasting every day in luxury. At his gate lay a poor man named Lazarus, covered with sores, longing for crumbs that fell from the rich man's table. No one helped him. Only the dogs came and licked his wounds. And then came the reversal. Both men died. Lazarus was carried by angels to Abraham's side. The rich man was buried, and in Hades, tormented in flames, he lifted his eyes. He saw Abraham far away with Lazarus by his side. And he cried out, "Father Abraham, have mercy on me. Send Lazarus to dip the tip of his finger in water and cool my tongue, for I am in anguish in this flame." But Abraham replied with chilling finality, "Son, remember, in your lifetime you received good things and Lazarus bad. Now he is comforted and you are in agony. And besides, between us and you a great chasm has been fixed, so that none can cross from here to you, nor from there to us." The rich man, trembling in despair, begged, "Then send Lazarus to my father's house to warn my 5 brothers, so they won't come to this place of torment." Abraham's reply thundered, "They have Moses and the prophets. Let them listen to them." Still the man protested, "No, Father Abraham, but if someone rises from the dead, they will repent." And then came the most terrifying sentence. If they do not listen to Moses and the prophets, they will not be convinced even if someone rises from the dead. The crowd fell silent. The weight was unbearable. The message was a blade cutting to the soul. Your choices in this life determine your eternity. Wealth, status, appearance, none of it matters. What matters is your response to God and how you treat those in need. And I ask you directly, if your life ended tonight, would you resemble the rich man or Lazarus? But Jesus did not soften the blow. He gave them another parable, the parable of the unworthy servant. Imagine a servant who works all day in the field. He comes in exhausted and does not expect thanks or applause. Instead, he prepares the master's meal, serves him, and only afterward eats for himself. Jesus asked, "Does the master thank the servant for doing what he was commanded?" The answer was obvious, no. And then he delivered the crushing truth. So you also, when you have done everything you were commanded, should say, 'We are unworthy servants. We have only done our duty.'" It was a lesson in radical humility. Service to God is not about applause. Obedience is not for recognition. Everything we are, everything we do, already belongs to Him. The crowd was stunned. Parable after parable, each one heavier than the last, tearing down pride, breaking excuses, confronting hearts. And now I ask you, which one hits you hardest? The prodigal son showing the father's scandalous love, the rich man and Lazarus exposing the seriousness of eternity, or the unworthy servant destroying our pride? Tell me in the comments, because your answer is part of this journey. But listen carefully. What Jesus was about to say next would push everything to the breaking point. The stories were building toward a climax, toward a decision no one could ignore. Jesus had just shattered the pride of those who thought their works made them worthy. Many in the crowd lived under the illusion that prayers, rituals, or religious effort earned them special standing. But this parable cut that lie to the ground. Service is not a privilege to boast in. It is the bare minimum of love to a God who already owns all. So let me ask you plainly, do you see yourself as deserving of reward, when in reality everything you give already belongs to God? But Jesus didn't stop there. His voice grew firm. His next parable was about justice and prayer, the parable of the persistent widow and the unjust judge. There was a judge in a city who neither feared God nor respected people. He was the very image of corruption. In that same city lived a widow, alone, powerless, forgotten. Yet day after day she came to him, pleading, "Grant me justice against my adversary." At first the judge ignored her. He dismissed her as unimportant, but she did not stop. She kept returning, she kept knocking, she wore him down with persistence. And finally, though he had no sense of justice, he gave her what she asked, just to silence her. And then Jesus delivered the punch. If even a corrupt judge yields to persistence, how much more will the righteous judge of heaven and earth answer his children who cry out to him day and night? The weight hung in the air. Many listening had already given up on prayer. They had whispered to themselves that God had forgotten them. They had stopped knocking on heaven's door. And now I turn to you. Have you stopped praying because you believed God wasn't listening? Have you walked away one prayer too soon? Because the truth is this: heaven is listening. And the question is not whether God hears, but whether you will persist until the answer comes. Without pausing, Jesus told another parable, a mirror that left no one untouched. Two men went up to the temple to pray. One was a Pharisee, admired, respected, the picture of religion. The other, a tax collector, despised, branded a traitor. The Pharisee stood tall and prayed, "God, thank you that I am not like other men, robbers, adulterers, or even this tax collector. I fast twice a week. I give tithes of all I get." His prayer was a list of his own virtues. But the tax collector could not even lift his eyes. Beating his chest, he cried, "God, have mercy on me, a sinner." And then Jesus shocked them all. It was the tax collector, not the Pharisee, who went home justified before God. For everyone who exalts himself will be humbled, but he who humbles himself will be exalted. The crowd gasped. How could it be that the despised man was accepted and the religious one rejected? But the truth burned like fire. God is not impressed with appearances. He looks for brokenness, humility, and a heart that admits its need. And you, when you pray, who do you resemble more? the proud Pharisee or the repentant sinner? The tension was rising with every word. Then Jesus gave them one of the most haunting parables, the parable of the 10 virgins. 10 maidens waited for the bridegroom with their lamps burning. 5 were wise, they carried extra oil. 5 were foolish, they carried none. The bridegroom delayed, all grew drowsy and slept. At midnight the cry rang out, "Here is the bridegroom, come out to meet him." All the virgins rose, but the foolish discovered their oil was gone. They begged the wise to share, but the answer was firm, "No, there may not be enough for both us and you. Go and buy some for yourselves." While they were away, the bridegroom arrived. The wise entered the feast with him, and the door was shut. Later the foolish returned, pounding desperately, "Lord, Lord, open to us." But he replied with devastating words, "Truly I tell you, I do not know you." The lesson was clear. It is not enough to look ready. You must truly be ready. Faith cannot be borrowed. Preparation cannot be shared. And when the door closes, it will not open again. So I ask you, if tonight the cry was heard, "The bridegroom is coming," would your lamp still be burning? The atmosphere was heavy. No one moved. Then Jesus told another story, the parable of the talents. A master entrusted his servants with his property. To one he gave 5 talents, to another 2, and to another 1, each according to their ability. The one with 5 traded and gained 5 more. The one with 2 did likewise, but the one with 1 dug a hole and buried it. When the master returned, he praised the first 2. "Well done, good and faithful servant. Enter into the joy of your Lord." But to the third he said, "You wicked and lazy servant." His fear was no excuse. What he refused to use was taken from him, and he was cast into outer darkness. The lesson burned into every heart. God does not expect excuses. He expects fruit. Every gift, every opportunity, every moment you are given is a responsibility. And what you refuse to use, you will lose. So let me ask you, what are you doing with what God has placed in your hands? Are you multiplying it or burying it? Jesus pressed the point with another parable, similar yet sharper, the parable of the minas. A nobleman left to receive a kingdom, and before departing he gave 10 servants each a mina. Upon returning, he called them to account. One had multiplied his mina 10-fold and was rewarded with authority over 10 cities. Another had gained 5 and was given 5 cities. But one had done nothing. He returned the mina untouched. The master condemned him with his own words. "If you knew I was a hard man, why didn't you at least put my money in the bank to earn interest?" His mina was stripped away and given to the most faithful. The message cut both ways. Reward for the diligent, condemnation for the negligent. The crowd was shaken to the core. Every parable was a reminder, this life is not rehearsal. It is the final exam, and time is running out. Jesus' voice carried like thunder now. These were not mere lessons, they were warnings. Each story was a mirror. Each word was a demand. And now I turn to you. Which one reflects you? Are you the wise virgin or the foolish, the faithful servant or the negligent, the humble tax collector or the proud Pharisee? Write it in the comments, because your answer may open the door to a conversation you've been avoiding your whole life. But Jesus wasn't done. He lifted his eyes toward the crowd, and what he spoke next was the climax of it all. A story of judgment, of eternal separation, of destinies forever sealed. The Son of Man, he said, will return in glory. He will sit on his throne. All nations will be gathered before him. and he will separate them as a shepherd separates sheep from goats. To those on his right he will say, Come, you who are blessed by my Father. Inherit the kingdom prepared for you since the foundation of the world. And the reason was shocking, not great sermons, not loud prayers, but acts of compassion. For I was hungry, and you gave me food. I was thirsty, and you gave me drink. I was a stranger, and you welcomed me. Naked, and you clothed me. Sick, and you visited me. In prison, and you came to me. The righteous, stunned, would ask, Lord, when did we do these things for you? And he will answer with words that pierced eternity. Truly, I tell you, whatever you did for one of the least of these brothers of mine, you did for me. But then, with equal force, he will turn to those on his left. Depart from me, you cursed, into the eternal fire prepared for the devil and his angels. For I was hungry, and you gave me nothing. I was thirsty, and you gave me no drink. I was a stranger, and you did not welcome me. Naked, and you did not clothe me, sick and in prison, and you did not visit me. The message crushed every illusion. Faith is not proven in words, but in deeds of love. The way you treat the most vulnerable reveals your true relationship with God. Here the crowd realized something that unsettled them deeply. Empty religion does not save. What saves is the transformation that produces practical love. So let me ask you, who have you ignored, thinking they didn't matter, when in reality it was Christ himself standing before you? Jesus knew doubts about his return were burning in their minds, so he painted another image, powerful, undeniable. The coming of the Son of Man will be like lightning that flashes across the sky from east to west, instant, visible, unstoppable. It will not be secret. It will not be hidden. Like a bolt of lightning that lights the whole horizon, all will see it, and no one will ever be able to say, I didn't notice. The people leaned in, trembling, when Jesus spoke again, this time with one of his most intimate and tender images, the Good Shepherd. A true shepherd does not sneak in by another way. He enters by the gate. The sheep know his voice. He calls them by name. He leads them, and they follow because they trust him. Then came the shocking declaration, I am the gate for the sheep. Whoever enters through me will be saved. I am the Good Shepherd. The Good Shepherd lays down his life for the sheep. The crowd froze. This wasn't a parable anymore, it was revelation. He wasn't just a teacher, not just a prophet. He was declaring himself the shepherd who would give his life for his flock. And then came words that shook them even more. The thief comes only to steal, kill, and destroy. But I have come that they may have life and have it abundantly. Every phrase was spiritual dynamite. He wasn't offering religion. He was offering life. He wasn't promising rules. He was promising abundance. So let me ask you the question you cannot escape. Do you recognize his voice amid all the other voices around you? Are you following the shepherd, or the thieves disguised as guides who seek only to destroy your soul? Every parable had been a seed cast into the soil of their hearts. Some fell on hard ground, some among thorns, but some were already beginning to take root. He had spoken of sowers and hidden treasures, of nets pulling in fish, of unjust judges, of foolish virgins, of faithful and lazy servants. He had spoken of prodigal sons and waiting fathers, of rich men dying alone and poor men being carried to comfort. Every story was a mirror. Every teaching was a map. And now, with the image of the Good Shepherd, the people knew this wasn't just instruction, it was invitation. The air was heavy with decision, because these weren't stories to entertain. They were truths that divided life from death, eternity from ruin. and each one listening knew they could not walk away neutral. They had to choose. Would they follow the shepherd or stay in the pen waiting for the thieves? And now I turn to you. Are you a sheep who recognizes the voice of the shepherd, or are you lost among voices that steal your peace? Write it in the comments. Your answer might awaken someone else who needs this truth. But listen carefully. What Jesus revealed next was not just another parable. It was the clearest unveiling of the mission for which he had come. A teaching so profound it tied every story together into a single climax, because each parable was more than a tale. It was a seed. Seeds sown into the soil of every heart, seeds with the power to grow into eternal fruit. And so the inevitable question hung in the air. What kind of soil is your heart? Jesus had described them all. The hardened path where the seed never enters and the enemy steals it away. The rocky ground where faith sprouts quickly but withers under trial because there are no roots. The thorny ground where worries, riches, and pleasures choke life before it bears fruit. And finally, the good soil, humble and broken, watered with prayer, ready to yield a harvest beyond imagination. The crowd shifted uneasily. This wasn't just metaphor. It was a diagnosis of the soul, and Jesus was forcing them to look in the mirror. And you, which one are you? Hard path, shallow rock, choking thorns, or good soil prepared to bear fruit? The kingdom of God does not work by human rules. Here the last become first. The humble are exalted. Those who lose their lives for Christ find them. The greatest are not those who seek to be served, but those who serve. And tell me, how many times have you sought to be first, when in heaven that places you last? Jesus reinforced this paradox with the most moving stories. In the prodigal son, he showed that no matter how far you've run or how many times you've failed, the Father's grace is greater than your sin, and his love stronger than your failure. Picture the son returning, broken, trembling, filthy, empty-handed. And picture the father running to embrace him, covering him with kisses, restoring his dignity. That scene was not fiction. It was heaven's portrait of how God waits for every sinner. So let me ask you, are you still far away, starving among the swine, when a father is waiting with arms wide open? But grace was never meant to be received only. It was meant to be given. That's why Jesus gave parables about forgiveness, stories that confronted the darkest corners of our hearts. Because we are quick to demand justice and slow to extend mercy. The message was unshakable. If you have been forgiven of an impossible debt, how can you withhold forgiveness from others? Forgiveness is not an accessory of faith. It is the very essence of a transformed heart. And here is the emotional blow. If you refuse to forgive, it only proves you have not truly understood how much has been forgiven of you. Jesus also spoke of the Good Samaritan, a parable that shattered every social and religious wall. Compassion was not bound by nation, creed, or history. Your neighbor was anyone in need. True love does not calculate the cost, nor ask if someone deserves to be helped. Love acts because acting is its very nature. The crowd fell silent, because no one could hear that story without remembering the times they had walked past suffering with excuses on their lips. And you, how many have you left lying on the road, justifying it with pious excuses or the busyness of life? Jesus also spoke of readiness. Stories like the wise and foolish virgins were direct warnings. The message was unmistakable. Christ's return will be sudden, and there will be no time to improvise. The oil in the lamps was personal preparation, the kind no one can lend you. Either you have it or you don't. And once the door is shut, it will never open again. It was a chilling reminder. Faith cannot be delegated, preparation cannot be shared. So let me ask you, if the midnight cry were heard tonight, would your lamp still be burning? Jesus also spoke of the growth of the kingdom. He compared it to a mustard seed, tiny and overlooked, yet growing into a towering tree where birds find rest. He compared it to leaven, invisible yet unstoppable, transforming the entire loaf from within. The message was pure hope. Even when your faith feels small, even when your progress feels invisible, God is working. His kingdom advances in ways you cannot always see. But here is the crucial truth. Growth requires patience. And the question is unavoidable. Do you have the patience to wait for fruit, or do you abandon too soon because you see no immediate results? Every parable was an urgent call. They weren't bedtime stories. They were keys opening eternity, mirrors reflecting the soul. The people knew they could not walk away neutral. Each parable demanded a response, and the same is true for you. You cannot hear these stories and remain unmoved. Either you embrace them and let them transform your life, or you harden your heart. And what Jesus revealed last was more radical than all the rest. A story not about seeds or sons, but about judgment, final, irreversible, eternal. The parables were not scattered tales. They were one great mirror, forcing every man and woman to face themselves. A lamp shining into the darkest corners of the soul. And after walking through this garden of wisdom, one question remains: what will you do with what you have heard? First, let these teachings examine your heart. Like light revealing what was hidden, the parables expose the hardness within us, the thorns of worry that choke faith, the pride that keeps us from receiving, the bitterness that poisons our relationships. They strip away masks of religion. They force us to face the truth. Second, let these truths reshape your priorities. When you grasp the incomparable worth of the kingdom, you cannot keep living for what will pass away. The hidden treasure and the pearl of great price remind us that all this world offers is dust compared to Christ. It is not loss, it is gain. And I ask you, what are you clinging to that keeps you from embracing Christ fully? Third, live these parables in your relationships. The Good Samaritan leaves us without excuse. It is not about who is worthy of our love, it is about who needs it. It is not about waiting for convenience. It is about stopping on the road and reflecting God's heart through tangible acts of mercy. Every act of compassion, every quiet service, every decision to love without condition turns your life into a living parable. Fourth, the parables teach us to see suffering differently. Like the grain of wheat that must die to produce fruit, we learn that trials are not punishment but transformation. In God's hands, tears are seeds of hope. Fifth, and most urgent, live with joyful expectation of Christ's return. Every parable of watchfulness, the virgins, the faithful servants, the builders on rock, reminds us history is racing to a climax. The Son of Man will return in glory. On that day, no excuse will remain, only truth. Friend, listen closely. The parables are not relics of a distant past. They are maps for your present and promises for your future. Every time you forgive, you live the parable of the forgiven servant. Every time you serve in silence, you become the Good Samaritan in action. Every time you use your talents for God's glory, you write the parable of the talents with your own life. Your life can become a story that preaches without words. a parable that proves the kingdom of God is here. And now the decision is yours. Admiring the parables is not enough. Understanding them in your mind is not enough. The call is to live them. Because there is a father still waiting for the prodigal to come home. There is a shepherd still calling his sheep by name. There is a king still preparing a banquet and extending the invitation. And there is a Savior who is coming soon. What will you do with this invitation? If these truths have stirred your heart, don't let this moment pass. Make your life a living parable of the gospel's power. Let others see Christ through your love, your forgiveness, your service, your hope. The same Jesus who spoke these stories 2,000 years ago is here today, knocking at the door of your heart. Open it, let the seed fall into good soil. Let it take root. Let it bear fruit, fruit that will last forever. And as we continue this journey together, subscribe to this channel so you don't miss the treasures still hidden in His Word. What we've seen today is only the beginning. There is so much more to discover, to live, to experience of Christ's infinite love. Let these parables not be mere stories you once heard, but realities that transform your every day. Let your life be the sermon. Let your story be the parable. May the Good Shepherd lead you. May the loving Father embrace you. And may the Holy Spirit make your life a living parable that others can read. Amen.